think we are coming through live, loud and clear. Fantastic. This is going to just be a quick one tonight, guys. Oh wow, we've already got a couple of hundred watching. Fantastic. How are you all? How low are we going? Maybe a little bit lower. And then I think we've got our first round of buyers that are waiting. 52,000 I think is going to be pretty interesting if we have a little dip there. And 1640-ish, a lot of people waiting for Ethereum. But it can certainly head lower on some bad news or anything like that as well. That's not what I'm going to talk about tonight. Tonight we're going to talk about some good news. I'll give everyone just a minute to tune in. But we're going to have a little bit of a walk down memory lane, a bit of nostalgia, as we're just waiting to see if this is going to roll over. This bounce hasn't been that convincing yet, has it? There's not a lot of volume coming in at the moment. If anything, Ethereum looks a little bit better. But we're right around this daily trend line, depending on how you want to draw it. Some people, you can argue you can draw it like this. We've already broken it, and this is the retest before we actually have a sharper move lower. So it's all up to you, isn't it? On-chain doesn't look too bad. There's not a lot of panic selling to exchanges or anything yet. If anything, we've had a lot of coins come off exchanges, to be honest. So I think big picture, we're still, in a bull market unless things change. There's options expiry this week. There's a bit of FUD news going around about some regulations. So look, all that stuff can come into the news cycle, which tends to happen in a correction. Bad news tries to amplify the correction once we're in it. But anyway, we've got 500 watching. So smash that like button, as Carl says. Let's dive into this quickly. I don't want it to be a long one. So Bitcoin searches a spike in Turkey as central bank chief is fired and the lira plummets. So this is a long-term chart since 2013 of the Turkish lira, their currency. It's lost about 80 or 90% of its value. This is only less than 10 years. Now, just recently, they've had this central bank head and he raised interest rates. So one of the things you can do to stabilize your currency, and this is one of the options on the table for all currencies around the world as we get into these currency wars, everyone's printing too much money, you raise interest rates and that makes people want to deposit money in a bank and get an interest rate. So I think you raised them to like 20% and it stemmed the bleeding. So this is a 4-hour chart. You can see that the currency actually started to strengthen a little bit and then he got fired. So once again, politics versus finance, how often do we see it? It goes on just about everywhere. And so, we obviously had a huge drop. One thing I will mention is that this country seems to always have these political, ebbs and flows in the background, but it's always been a strong crypto country for one of these reasons, because anyone that's been in crypto throughout this time has not only seen the price of Bitcoin go up as much as it has in US dollars, they've obviously seen their own currency drop 90% as well. So you've had 1,000% on top of whatever Bitcoin's done, better off you are in Turkish lira terms. This is the power of Bitcoin that we don't think about often enough when we're just looking at charts and all that. So running Turkey's central bank is a most perilous assignment. So, you try to do the right thing, you get fired. I'm not sure if he's been exiled or whatever as well. I don't want to get into the politics too much, but what I do want to talk about is watching these Bitcoin volumes. So this is in the local currency and this is in actual Bitcoin. And yes, it's dropped off a lot, but that's because Bitcoin's gone from $10 back here to $60,000 a coin. So obviously there's going to be less Bitcoins changing hands. So I did a video a couple of years ago just saying this is where the huge opportunity is. The next billion users and all these countries outside of the big ones that are always in the news, that's where Bitcoin can have a real impact but have just massive real adoption. But I want to rewind back to 2013 because this is what kicked off a massive rally at the time in Bitcoin, and it was the first time Bitcoin had acted as a macro asset. So this is BLX. Let's hide all my gobbledygook. It was the start of 2013. So it was when we first ran from $10, $20 up to $250, and then we crashed all the way. It was back down to $50 or even $30, I remember at the time, because this is when I bought a lot of Bitcoin here in Australia, where it was about $30 to $50 during this crash. But this was when it was all through the news, through the headlines. So Cyprus is getting, the crisis boosting this unique currency, the Bitcoin. US government trying to regulate Bitcoin, starting to recognize a bit of a pattern here. The US Treasury to Bitcoin, we're watching you. Online gambling, using Bitcoins, not dollars. What else do we have here? Bitcoin has a bug. These new chips that mine 50 times faster. So starting to see things like FPGAs and ASICs. Anything else here I wanted to mention? I think it was this next one. Oh yeah, look at these ECB headlines. So it was what was going on in Europe that was very, very interesting for Bitcoin. So ECB, Mario Draghi, as always, talking about how much they're going to print money to send the euro lower. They're monitoring the value. We've got a record deal with Ireland and the ECB reaching this big deal with all their debt. Remember all that restructuring that we constantly had? The EU agreeing to ECB bank regulatory roles, so central banks getting involved in politics, and the German central bank profiting from all the ECB bond buying, whereas other countries are really struggling. So it just depends, and this is why I think it's always going to struggle. Christine Lagarde was head of the IMF at the time. She's now head of ECB, and she's keeping pressure on the ECB. So these are all the sort of things that, the macro, the friction, the backdrop, but the Eurozone to bail out Cyprus. So we don't know how it was going to work. And we went from all these talks about bailouts to countries saying we can't afford this, to switching to bail-ins. And that was when the Cyprus banks were going to bail in all the deposits of the customers. And basically government saying we can't afford to bail out the banks. We don't want to do this again after the financial crisis. We don't want to set that precedent. So we have to try something else. We're going to bail in depositors and they're going to take a haircut, as they called it. So Cyprus bank bailout could be a disastrous precedent. They're reneging on the government deposit insurance. Remember how everyone's got this insurance that goes up to, I think, $250,000 in most countries? So this was really rocking the apple cart in terms of what are we going to do whenever there's another disaster? Are we just going to keep bailing out the banks? We can't do that. People were already protesting. Banks were shut, ATMs were empty. All this stuff was happening, and this was just such a boon for Bitcoin at the time, and it could be another catalyst at the moment. It only takes that spark to go from 10%, 20%. Next thing you know, you're at 50, 60, 70, 80% of people are using Bitcoin to escape what's happening in the system. So this is a lot different to in the past, but think about back in 2013, there wasn't mobile apps. Most people wouldn't have even had a smartphone compared to now. And so if these issues start to resurface, everyone's got a smartphone, everyone's got a good internet connection, everyone has an app that they can buy Bitcoin, or they now have a friend or access to local Bitcoins. So it's just the Bitcoin, one thing that it does is almost make governments more responsible, because they're going to start to see how many people run for the exits. And they're going to try and slap more rules in place and whatever, but when the country and the currency is falling apart, you don't play by the rules anymore. You do what you have to put food on the table for your family. When people want to take away your life savings, you're not going to stick to the rules and they say you can't use Bitcoin, you have to have your life savings eroded because we say so. It's a pretty clear choice. So just watch for these sort of things to start to happen. We're already hearing about emerging markets being put under pressure from the Fed's actions can cause inflation elsewhere in other countries. Everything is connected. That's why I always talk about this macro. So don't think for a second that just because it's all about America at the moment and what Powell says and what the ECB are doing with their bond buying program, it's all these other emerging markets that are all going to be affected by this monetary policy and all this printing, all these negative rates, rising cost of living and food inflation. If the price of rice goes up 50%, think about how much that's going to hurt these places that only really have that $2 a day. And now a lot of their staples have gone up 50%. That can go from poverty to extreme poverty in those countries. And it all comes back to this financial cause from basically the US acts as the world's central bank, and what they do has repercussions everywhere. So that's pretty much it, guys, from what I wanted to talk about and waffle on, have a quick little rant there. But yeah, I highly recommend going back and reading all those headlines from 2013 on what happened there and what kicked off that bull market. So I'll wrap it up, keep it nice and short. Guys, head over to the platform if you haven't already. Some of these research reports and resources have just been unbelievable lately. I get up each morning and look forward to reading these and watching these videos. So thanks for tuning in, guys. Smash that like button. I'll talk to you again soon.